He's muted though. Okay, let's continue the discussion of Vigash. Vigash is about your approach to things, how you start things off, what you come in with when you enter the situation. Rabbi Dr. Jonathan Sachs, Shalom, said that whenever he spoke to the Rebbe was so polite, but there was one time the Rebbe interrupted him. And that was, I think, in this first audience with the Rebbe, if I remember correctly, where he was trying to interview the Rebbe about the Rebbe's position on Jewish life in America and the world. And the Rebbe turned the tables around. The Rebbe started to ask him what he's doing for Judaism and for Jewish life in the college that he was in I think it was in Oxford. And he began his sentence with, "The situation I find myself in." The Rebbe interrupted him and said, "A Jew doesn't just find himself in a situation," I know the words I've used, but something like this. A Jew, you put yourself in a situation. And if you put yourself in one situation, you can put yourself in another situation. That's what the word Vigash is about, the way you approach something. How do you begin your approach to being in this world, being in exile, the challenges you have? What is your approach? Where do you start? Let's continue. And that begins talking about our generation and addressing the question we had in the beginning of the Sikha. What is the message for us in the last seconds before Mashiach comes? What are we supposed to take from this parsha? Oysid base. Apia na yuvan gamken alinin vayira vigash al Yehuda negel adrein kufasenu v'vdenu b'yad l'fnei hagul mitzvah. Now we can understand the lesson from the words Yehuda approaches Yosef regarding our generation, the time period we are in, standing now right before the true and complete redemption. Same despite the strength of Yehuda in his time, in Mordechai in his time, and the tzaddikim and Jews in every generation, there were still limitations from without. The nations of the world made various decrees against the Jewish people that did not always allow them to withstand their decrees. It didn't allow them to stand with a full strength. I was reading yesterday the previous Rebbe's account of his imprisonment, how he tried to put on tefillin. He asked the guard who was taking him to the 6th unit, where they were going to decide his fate, and how he was climbing the iron stairs of the Spalerka prison, and how he asked the guard to put on film. He begged him to put on film, to allow him to put on film, and the guard refused. And the previous Rebbe saw he wasn't going to allow him to put on tefillin, so he put on the hand film himself as he was walking, and the guard kicked the previous Rebbe off the ladder. He fell on all the steps of the ladder. And the Frierdiker Rebbe had some kind of an iron belt for health reasons for his stomach, and that broke and went into his skin, when he was knocked off all these steps, and the guard kept on screaming at him why he's going so slow, and while the previous Rebbe is in incredible pain, and how he's pushing himself to follow the guard, and how he finally gets to the interrogation room, and the interrogator is looking through his things, and while he's looking through his things, he again tries to put on the hand film, the head film, and he successfully puts them on. He gets up to the bracha in Shona Esrei, in Mishnah Tzadikim, and how he's up to this bracha, the interrogator turns around and he starts beating him mercilessly because he's wearing the tefillin. He defined his instruction. So yeah, there were tzaddikim who totally defied whatever was defied the decrees of the various governments in history, but there were still limitations, despite their strength. This is not the case in our generation. This is not the case in our time. We see clearly that we don't have the disturbances that used to be. And the nations of the world allow the Jewish people to act as they wish. And therefore only depends upon the desire of the Jewish people. So just like in Egypt, it says that they dwelled in the land, when they held on to the land, they were fruitful and they were multiplied. So too is this in many places in the world today, that the Jewish people are acting in various places in the world with the full strength and the full courage. Both in this country, in America, which is a country which is the government of kindness, that allows the Jewish people to act as they decide, as they wish. And we see also in other countries, and the Rebbe says in the most recent times, the Rebbe speaking in 1991, we see in most recent times how in other countries which used to limit the Jewish people and wouldn't allow Jewish people to keep Torah mitzvahs, they have taken down their decrees. They've made major changes, and which Rebbe pointed out is a sign of the Geula. Just thinking about the recent events in the world today of the Abraham Accords, and it's just incredible the amount of freedom that we have here and in other places of the world, and therefore it only depends on what we want. Do we want to act like Mordechai and only ascribe significance to Hashem, nothing else, or do we ascribe power to something else, as Haman says we shall? It's up to us. But Adrabah, the truth is exactly the opposite. Not only are the Jewish people free to act as they wish, but more, the government helps them. In addition, the fact that Jewish people are able to act in freedom to keep their own Torah mitzvahs, we see in the most recent years how it's become easier and easier in more places to be successful and to express total freedom and strength wherever the Jewish people are. Because the world, not just the Jewish world, but also the Gentile world, is a vessel to receive the Torah and mitzvahs guarding the nations of the world. They're able to receive the 7 laws of Noah. It's even possible, as the Rebbe said, we spoke and we have inspired many times, most recently, about the Friedrich Rebbe's announcement that we've already finished all preparations for Mashiach, and now we just have to bring the Geula down into the physical of the world, into the corporal part of the world, and the lowest parts of the world, in an open way that's visible to our eyes. So not only is the world, not only is the Jewish world a vessel to receive the Torah mitzvahs, not only is the Gentile world a vessel to receive the 7 laws of Noah, but more, the world is now a vessel to receive the Geula. It's very interesting how the Rebbe words this. It says we can bring the Geula down to the physicality of the world, and in Hebrew, another word for physicality, which means something which is lower and coarser, chumrius. Chumrius is what we refer to in the Hasidic lexicon as grub, as something which is abominable, something which is physical in an abominable way, something which is low. So we're able to bring the Geula not just into Gashmius, but also into the Chumrius, and then it qualifies the Chumrius that becomes Gashmius, the corporal lower part of the world, which has become more physical. So we're able to bring the Geula down, not just the 7 laws of Noah, but to actually bring the light of the true Geula down to this world. Despite the fact that we're able to have such strength now during the time of exile, and to even be in a state of spiritual redemption within the time of exile. Still, that's not the perfection of Geula in the simple sense. It's not in an open, visible way to our eyes. We still have all limitations of exile. In the language of the Talmud, says how Hashem says, woe is to a father whose children are not by his table, and woe to the children who have been exiled from their father's table. So we still have that situation going on. Despite all of our freedom, we're still in a state where we're missing being by our father's table, being in Yerushalayim in the Beis Hamikdash. We're like an aguna, a woman whose husband has gone off to a faraway country across the ocean. After being engaged to her, she's no longer able to marry anyone else until the marriage, till the husband comes back. So in a similar way, the Jewish people are tied to Hashem, but they're not by Hashem's table until Hashem, so to speak, comes back, until Hashem reveals himself to us in the true Geula, and we'll have the marriage with Hashem. So we are not at all satisfied, although we have full power to do it and full volition, do whatever we want in regards to Torah mitzvahs, but this is not at all what we desire, and we ask every day, I must say, how long will this go on? Next column, all we need to do today is to open our eyes, and we'll see how the whole world is demanding that every Jew should be in the living in the same manner that he will be living with after the true will arrive. The world is waiting for us to express who we are and what we are. Who are we? We are the people of the future. We're the citizens of the time of Mashiach, and the world is waiting for us to. If we would open our eyes, we would see how the world's waiting for us to live that way, to live as if Mashiach has already come, in the sense to live with total. Just think for a second. After Mashiach will come, how will daven Shachris? How will give tzedakah? How will Avos Yisrael? So the world's waiting for us to be at that time already, and to live, each of us, to live as if that time has already come. As the famous story with the Jew who was trying out for a position as a Indian chief. As advertisement that the Indians were looking for an Indian chief. So Yankel says, exactly what I'm good at. And he tries out as position of Indian chief, and the Indians say, well, in order to be our chief, you have to know what kind of winter is going to be this year. So Yankel says, no problem. It's going to be cold. Okay, we'll see how this goes. So the Indians are very satisfied with his very non-committal response. And after a few days, they say to him, well, how cold will it be? To answer this question, I must go and descend to heaven to ask the spirits. So he goes out of the compound, and he takes out a cell phone, and he calls the weather bureau. And how cold will this winter be? So they say it's going to be pretty cold. Comes back with pretty cold. All right, the Indians start chopping wood. And as winter approaches, the Indians are still wondering what pretty cold means. Hold on. Let me go ask the spirits again. Very cold. He called the weather bureau, so it's really, really cold this year. And the Indians are chopping wood. It's going to be very cold this year. He goes back to the weather bureau right before the onset of the winter season. And he says, guys, tell me exactly what you're referring to when you say it's really, how do you know? Like, what do you see? For one thing, says the weather bureau to this Jewish Indian chief, the Indians are chopping wood like crazy. We create our own reality. We dictate to the world how the world should look at us. As the spies that were sent to find the best route to conquer Israel said to Moshe Rabbeinu and the Jewish people, we were like grasshoppers in our eyes, and so we were in their eyes. The world is waiting for a Jew to, says the Rebbe, we would open our eyes, would realize the world is waiting for us to live in sync with the true complete Gula, to live as if Mashiach is already here. That's what the world is waiting for each of us to be. The world is waiting for us to take that position of holiness and godliness and goodness and leadership. V'yishleimar, shezeh gufa hu atam l'kach she'choreim beriyim k'eshehudim michel l'ame b'yinan yaz im kol take of ba'al batzka amos elam in order to albertzainam kim sha'enim yalchei gula shboiz gal pel k'yised dona adav abdi nosam le'elam yedo kol goim ken yavai lachin gam shtak v'pel v'matzos derenu kachonam licha yeshus gula mitzashen v'shetzakenu. The very fact we see today, how the Jewish people are able to stand proudly and keep all matters of Torah, and it only depends on their will, and the nations of the world respect them. That is happening because we are approaching the time of the Geula, when Hashem will crown David HaMelech to be the leader of the Jewish people, when all the nations of the world will know God. So this is reflected now in our generation as a preparation for the true Geula through Mashiach. We have this. The reason we have this now, why is it happening? It's a reflection of what is going to be revealed. This is because the world is changing. Mashiach is about to come, and that's why the world is granting us all this freedom, because it's something we're already tasting, something of the future. This is also alluded to by the opening verse of this Torah portion. It says Yehuda approaches Yosef together with the power of the Yosef of our generation. Who was Yosef of our generation? The previous Rebbe, together with the power of the Yosef of our generation. There's also Vigash of Yehuda. There's also Mashiach, who is about to come, who is being assisted with the strength that comes from Yosef in our generation, and who is Kamech Kapare, who Yehuda says, you are like Pare. The word Pare in Hebrew is related to the word Priya, which means revelation, as the Zohar says, that the origin, everything which is ends up in the lower place in the world, has a higher source. So Pare, which is the lowest of the low, emanates from, says the Zohar, a place of the revelation of all the lights of Hashem. So Yosef, Hatzadik, in our generation, the previous Rebbe, his efforts are bearing fruit, and they're approaching Yehuda. They're granting the possibility for Mashiach Tzakenu to come. So what's the lesson for us? It says, take of how described by Yehudi. By showing the strength that we have as a Jew, that the world was created for the Jewish people, by acting with that strength, this itself brings the fulfillment of the words, and David, Avdi Nasam Leilam, and David, my servant, will be the master of the Jewish people forever. We bring that time about by being the master ourselves, by saying to the world, being proud, how we're having full strength to do whatever the Torah asks us to do, and highlighting the world was created for us. I shared with you earlier this week how that someone was asked by the Rebbe in an audience, how can you say the world was created for me? Isn't that arrogant? And the Rebbe answered, the word world in Hebrew means concealment. Why is there a concealment of godliness? Where is that coming from? Why does Hashem hide himself? Hashem hide himself for me, for the purpose of me revealing him. So the whole world is there. The concealment of godliness is there, not because it brings me down. On the contrary, Hashem gives me the ability to reveal godliness wherever I am, and it's there for my sake, so I should do something. I was going to paraphrase the rest of the sikh. I don't have that much time. This idea of Yigash Yehuda approaching Yosef, the power of a Jew in the world, in our generation, is emphasized also on the day of the 5th of Teves, which happened in the year that we said this talk on Thursday before Shabbos. The Shabbos is the 7th of Teves, within 3 days of the 5th of Teves. This day, the Rebbe says, of the 5th of Teves, is connected to the freedom and the redemption of the books and the manuscripts of our Rebbeim, in a way that there was the full agreement and the assistance of the non-Jews to the eyes of all the nations in the federal court. But there still are some books and manuscripts of the Frierdiker Rebbe, of the Rebbe Rashab, which are imprisonment in that country, in Russia, and they have not yet been returned, even though there was already a court order from the nations of the world. They already gave the order that it has to be freed. And I'm not sure what that was referring to. And this is connected with the fact that in the most recent days, the capital of that country has been changed and moved to a different city according to the laws of that country. And regarding these things, the law of the land is the law. I think that, so in the note 85, it explains a little bit more. This is exactly the opposite of the way things were in the time of the Alter Rebbe. That time of the Alter Rebbe, he wanted the Russians to win the war against the French, because this would bring the Jewish people to have more reverence for Hashem. The Alter Rebbe felt that being under the rule of Napoleon would not be good for the Jewish people spiritually. In our generation, what's unique is that even the country of France has become a place of Torah and fear of Hashem and spreading Yiddishkeit and Chassidus to the outside. And now there's a transformation and a change in Russia, changing the capital, etc. So that was pointing out how this how there is how basically the changes that are happening in the country indicate, as I said before, how we're approaching time of Mashiach, and therefore we see more the strength of the Jewish people and how everyone allows us to keep Torah mitzvahs. So what can every person do to actually cause the Svarim to be redeemed? The answer is very simple. By every single Jewish man and woman and child to bring to their home and to their library books and writings of Torah, new books, in addition to all the books they had before. Every Jew is supposed to have a house full of books, but to add more books. And it's very easy to fulfill this because every week more things of Torah are being printed. Some things are being printed again, and more importantly, there are brand new books being printed, so it's very easy to buy books and also to add more and more in receiving and buying books in general. As is known, that the Frierdiker Rebbe said that a book has to cost money. He even asked that on the various pamphlets of Chassidus that he printed, they should print a price. And he explained the reason why there should be a price printed on the book of Chassidus. It should say, this pamphlet costs this amount, that the price should be on the book. Why? He said, because in the world, the language of olam, world in Hebrew, comes from the word concealment. So in this world, which conceals ungodliness, something that's important costs money. As the Talmud says about a doctor, that a doctor who works for free is worth zero. So how much more so is this true regarding Torah, which Torah brings healing to the world? Torah must cost money in order for us to have the prestige for Torah. Torah has to cost money. And the quicker you go, the more praiseworthy you are, Everyone should accept good resolutions already now to fulfill this as soon as possible by making an order and to pay to be subscribed. Says various publishing houses have a system where you could just subscribe to all new books that they'll put out, and then you'll get the books immediately. So that's a great way to put yourself down to get more books. So too is it appropriate and correct to do the Jewish custom of giving holy books as a present to others, including small children, for a day that's a simcha that they have, or before a holiday. It's a very good thing to buy children as a gift. What you buy them books, but for their birthdays or for their for a holiday. So may be Hashem's will that through every single one of us, broadening our activity in broadening and expanding our libraries, getting new books. This should speed in the fulfillment of the pasuk, Yehuda approaching Yosef, that Yehuda approached Yosef to free Binyamin. So who is the Binyamin in our time? The Binyamin that's still in prison are the books and the writings of our Rebbes, that they should return to their true place, to the house of our Rebbe, to 770, which 770 is numerically equivalent to the word paratsta. Paratsta means to spread Torah and Chassidus, because that's the place from where Torah and Chassidus is spread to the whole world, and they should return to there to get and join together with all the other books and writings of our Rebbes. And immediately, mamish, this redemption, this svarim should bring the redemption of all the sparks of holiness in the entire world. And immediately, mamish, we should go, all the Jewish people should go together, the young and old, sons and daughters, with our silver and gold, together with all the books and all the writings of the Jewish people, to go together to our holy land, to Yerushalayim HaKodesh, to the holy mountain, to Beis HaMikdash, to Kodesh HaKadoshim, which there in the Kodesh HaKadoshim is the Even HaShasi, is the stone from which Hashem made the world, but that stone has not been changed since the time of creation, and all this should happen immediately, mamish. I just want to point out one more thing. I don't know where I saw this. I thought this was here. That mentions that the end of the Torah portion talks about how the I found it. It's here. I found it. It's a note 58. Note 58. The Rebbe says, look at note 58. Talmud shaykhin hepach kabal so malshem stakas dakas lochin rak amazakein lekona davdi yudan asa koch var gamat kansakein. At the end of the Torah portion, it talks about how the priests have more rights than the regular people living in Egypt. So the Rebbe says that the reason why the priests have more rights, where does that come from? It comes because the strength of Yosef, that we learned about yesterday, Yosef was someone who the Pharaoh assigned to have strength in Egypt. It wasn't something like that he was connected to Hashem beyond nature, like Yehuda, who defied the protocol, defied the system of the Pharaoh. Yosef's strength does emphasize the power of a Jew in exile, but with a limit. And so that limit lends to and nourishes a paradigm which can lead to idol worship. And that's why the end of the Torah portion does discuss, right before the very end of the Torah portion, there is a discussion about the priests having more rights. It comes because of this very negligible but very, very subtle kind of ascription of power to the world that the position of Yosef lends itself to, versus the very last verse of the Torah, of this week's Torah portion, the success of the Jewish people in Egypt, that emanates from the strength of Yehuda, who was like Mordechai, lo yichav, lo yishtachave, did not bow or bend, and only looks to Hashem and does not consider anything in the world of any significance whatsoever. And that's the approach we need to have to bring about the coming of Mashiach, to not give any power to anything in the world, and to realize who we are and what we are, and to be proud to keep the Torah and its mitzvahs. And l'chaim l'chaim, we should see it happen, take mamash immediately, not just the redemption of the Sfarim, but the redemption, as the Rebbe says, of all the sparks of holiness in the world, and the immediate